The red warning light on Rachel Bennett's dashboard flashed as she guided the old Honda down the rain-slick road, but she did not dare pull over. Caleb was wheezing beside her. Each breath came short and tight, followed by the faint whistle Rachel had learned to fear more than any siren. Her 12-year-old son leaned forward in the passenger seat, one hand pressed against his chest, while the other shook an inhaler that had already delivered its final dose. "Stay with me, sweetheart." Rachel kept her voice steady even as panic clawed its way up her throat. "Slow breath in, slow breath out. I'm trying, I know you are." Rain hammered the windshield so hard that the wipers could barely keep up. The nearest emergency room was 32 miles away. The urgent care clinic in town had closed 6 months earlier, the same clinic where Rachel had worked as a home health nurse until the owners announced without warning that the doors would never open again. She pressed harder on the gas. The engine coughed. "No," she whispered. The car shuddered once, then lost speed as they climbed the hill. Rachel glanced at the fuel gauge. Empty. She had put $8 in the tank that morning, all she could spare after paying for Caleb's refill. The prescription was waiting at the pharmacy where she worked nights, but payday was not until Friday, and the pharmacist on duty had already told her he could not release it early without payment. "Mom." Caleb's voice was small now. That frightened her more than the wheezing. Rachel steered onto the gravel shoulder and threw the car into park. She grabbed her purse, dumped its contents onto the center console, and found the emergency inhaler she kept wrapped in a clean dish towel beneath old receipts. "Please let there be one dose left." She removed the cap and shook it. The canister felt nearly weightless. Rachel placed it in Caleb's hand. "Breathe out first, all the way." He obeyed. 1, 2, 3. He pressed the inhaler. A faint burst of medicine escaped. Rachel held her breath while Caleb held his. 10 seconds passed, then 20. His shoulders slowly lowered. The tightness in his face eased though the whistle remained. Again she said, "There isn't any more. Try." He pressed the canister. Nothing happened. Rachel closed her eyes for half a second, fighting the image of all the things that could go wrong on a dark roadside with an empty gas tank and $4.17 in her checking account. Headlights appeared through the rain. A pickup truck slowed behind them, its hazard lights blinking. A gray-haired man in a volunteer fire department jacket climbed out and hurried toward Rachel's window. "You folks all right? My son's having an asthma attack," Rachel said. "The medicine helped a little, but we need to get to a pharmacy." The man did not waste time asking unnecessary questions. He opened the passenger door, looked at Caleb, and reached for the radio clipped to his jacket. 20 minutes later, Caleb was sitting beneath the bright lights of the county emergency room with an oxygen tube beneath his nose and a breathing treatment humming beside him. Rachel sat in a plastic chair near the bed, soaked to the skin, holding his shoe, because he had kicked it off when the nurse helped him onto the mattress. The doctor said he would be fine. The words should have brought relief. Instead, Rachel stared at the registration forms in her lap and wondered how much this visit would cost. Caleb watched her over the plastic mask. "I'm sorry," he said. Rachel's heart broke. She leaned forward and touched his damp hair. "You never apologize for needing to breathe. But if I hadn't, no." Her voice sharpened, and she softened it immediately. "None of this is your fault." He looked unconvinced. At 12, Caleb already knew the sound of overdue notices being opened. He knew his mother sometimes said she had eaten at work when there had not been enough dinner for two. He knew she checked the balance on her debit card before buying milk. What he did not know was that an eviction notice sat folded inside her purse. 14 days. That was how long they had before the new owner of their duplex expected them gone. Rachel had applied for 7 rentals. 5 never called back. 1 demanded a deposit equal to 2 months' rent. The last property manager looked at her credit report, saw the medical debt from Caleb's hospitalizations, and slid the application back across the desk. "I'm sorry," the woman had said. "The owner requires a higher score." Rachel had nearly laughed, as if a number could explain 8 years of nursing work, a closed clinic, a sick child, and a woman who had not taken a full day off in nearly a year. By sunrise, the storm had passed. The volunteer firefighter brought them 5 gallons of gas from a station near the hospital. Rachel thanked him until embarrassment colored her cheeks. "Just do the same for somebody else someday," he said. She drove Caleb home beneath a washed blue North Carolina sky. Mist lay between the distant foothills, and wet fields glimmered beside the road. Farm stands were still closed, their hand-painted signs advertising apples, honey, boiled peanuts, and late summer tomatoes. Their duplex appeared around the curve. A white envelope was taped to the front door. Rachel knew what it was before she parked. Caleb stayed in the car while she walked through the wet grass and pulled the envelope free. Final notice. The new owner had moved the deadline forward. They now had 10 days. Rachel folded this paper and placed it in her pocket. "What does it say?" Caleb asked when she returned. "Just something about the property sale." "Do we have to leave sooner?" She looked at him. He had his father's brown eyes and her unfortunate ability to recognize a lie before it was spoken. "Yes," she said. "We do." "How soon?" 10 days. Caleb stared through the windshield at the narrow brick duplex where they had lived for 5 years. His bicycle leaned against the porch railing. A blue jay hopped across the yard near the bedroom window. "Where are we going?" Rachel opened her mouth. Nothing came out. That afternoon, after settling Caleb with a neighbor, she went to the Crossroads Diner for her shift. The restaurant sat beside Highway 16 between a feed store and a church with a white steeple. The breakfast crowd had thinned, leaving behind the smell of bacon grease and burnt coffee. Rachel tied on her apron and began wiping tables. Her manager Donna watched her for several minutes before speaking. "You look like death warmed over. Caleb had trouble breathing last night. Is he all right?" "He will be." Donna poured coffee into 2 chipped mugs and pushed one toward her. "Sit down before you fall down." Rachel sat in a booth beneath a framed photograph of the brushy mountains in autumn. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Donna said, "I heard about the duplex." Rachel looked up. "Small town," Donna added apologetically. "I have 10 days. My cousin has a trailer outside Wilkesboro. I called her yesterday. She already rented it." Donna sighed. Rachel wrapped both hands around the coffee, though she did not drink it. $600 remained in the savings envelope hidden beneath her mattress. It had taken almost a year to collect. $5 after a good shift. 20 when someone left a generous tip. Birthday money from her sister in Ohio. The small tax refund she had promised herself she would not touch. $600. It was supposed to be their last protection against disaster. Now disaster had arrived, and $600 was not enough to stop it. During her break, Rachel sat in the supply room and searched rental listings on her phone. Every place she could afford was already taken. Every place still available required a deposit she did not have. She widened the search radius. Nothing. Then an advertisement appeared between 2 listings. County Tax Delinquent Property Auction. Rachel almost scrolled past it. She had never owned a home. Home ownership belonged to people with good credit, steady jobs, and savings accounts that contained more than one emergency. Still, she opened the link. Most properties began at prices far beyond her reach. A ranch house started at $42,000. A small commercial lot began at $18,500. Even a burned mobile home required a minimum bid of $3,000. Then she saw the farmhouse, 3 acres outside Cedar Hollow. Opening bid $500. The photograph showed a 2-story house nearly hidden behind kudzu and overgrown trees. Several windows were boarded. The porch roof sagged in the center, and vines climbed one chimney like green fingers. The description was brief. Property vacant, approximately 30 years. No active utilities. Structural damage probable. Multiple outbuildings in deteriorated condition. Sold as is. No inspection access prior to auction. Rachel enlarged the photograph. Beyond the house, she could make out the crooked rows of an old orchard. $500 for a house and 3 acres. It had to be worthless. Dangerous, even. She thought about Caleb coughing in a mold-filled house and nearly closed the page. Then she pictured him asking where they were going. A place like that might be impossible to repair. But it would be theirs. No landlord could sell it out from under them. No property manager could reject them because of a credit score. No stranger could tape an envelope to the door and give them 10 days to disappear. Donna found Rachel staring at her phone. What is that? A terrible idea. Donna leaned closer. Her eyebrows rose. The old Carter place, you know it. Everybody around Cedar Hollow knows it. What's wrong with it? Besides looking like it's one hard rain away from becoming firewood. Besides that. Donna hesitated. Rachel noticed. What, nothing useful? Just stories. What kind of Donna reached for the coffee pot. The kind people tell when a house has been empty too long. The auction was scheduled for the next morning. Rachel did not sleep. She sat at the kitchen table after Caleb went to bed, the $600 spread before her in 20s and 10s. The eviction notice lay beside it. At midnight, Caleb appeared in the doorway, wearing an old Carolina Panthers t-shirt. "You're buying that house, aren't you?" Rachel covered the cash with both hands. "You should be asleep. I heard you talking to Aunt Melissa." "I haven't decided." "Yes, you have." He sat across from her. Rachel studied his thin face, still pale from the night before. "The house could be in terrible condition," she said. "We might not be able to live there for a long time. It might be the worst mistake I've ever made." "Would it be ours if I win it?" Caleb considered that. "Then maybe it's a mistake. Nobody can make us leave." The courthouse smelled of old paper floor wax and rain-damp coats. Rachel wore the navy dress she had once used for nursing interviews and carried the envelope of cash inside her purse. Around her sat contractors, investors, and men who spoke casually about foundations, liens, and resale values. She took a chair in the back. Property after property sold for more than its opening bid. Rachel's hope diminished with each raised hand. When the auctioneer finally announced the farmhouse on Carter Mill Road, the room became strangely quiet. Opening bid $500. No one moved. Rachel raised her hand. $500 from the lady in the back. "Do I hear $550?" A broad-shouldered man in a work jacket lifted 2 fingers. $550. Rachel's pulse hammered. $600, the auctioneer asked. That was everything. Not almost everything. Everything. Rachel thought of the motel room she could buy for a few nights. The groceries the money could cover. The medicine Caleb would need again next month. Then she remembered the eviction notice. She raised her hand. 600. The man in the work jacket glanced back at her. His face was weathered, his beard touched with gray. He studied Rachel for a long moment, not with annoyance but with recognition. The auctioneer asked for 650. The man lowered his hand. Going once at 600. Going twice. Rachel's fingers tightened around her purse. Sold. The sound of the gavel seemed impossibly small for something that had just changed her entire life. At the clerk's counter, Rachel surrendered the envelope. In return, she received a packet of papers and an old brass key. The clerk, a woman with silver glasses hanging from a chain, read the address and paused. "The Carter place," she said. "That's what people keep calling it." The clerk looked toward the line behind Rachel, then lowered her voice. "Not many folks would take that property even for $600. "Why not?" The woman slid the deed packet across the counter. "It's been empty a long time." "That isn't an answer." "No," the clerk said quietly. "I suppose it isn't." Rachel picked Caleb up from school and told him they owned a house. For half a mile he said nothing. Then he smiled. It was the first real smile she had seen from him in weeks. The road to Cedar Hollow narrowed as it climbed toward the foothills. They passed weathered barns, apple orchards, and small churches surrounded by graveyards older than the highway. The driveway was nearly invisible. Rachel drove past it twice before spotting the rusted mailbox leaning beneath a curtain of vines. Branches scraped both sides of the Honda as they followed the rutted path. Then the farmhouse appeared. Rachel stopped the car. The auction photograph had been kind. The white paint had peeled away in broad strips, exposing gray wood beneath. Kudzu swallowed half the porch. Several windows were broken, and the front steps leaned as though exhausted from standing. Caleb's smile disappeared. "We own that." Rachel forced herself to breathe. "Yes." A crow lifted from the roof and vanished toward the orchard. They entered through the front door after Rachel fought with the swollen lock. The smell hit first: dust, damp wood, animal nests, and something sour beneath it all. Sunlight entered through broken blinds, revealing fallen plaster and furniture draped in rotting sheets. Still beneath the ruin, Rachel saw beauty. Wide heart pine floors, hand-carved trim, a stone fireplace large enough to stand inside. "This room could be nice," Caleb said softly. It could. They explored carefully. In the kitchen, rusted pans still hung above an old cast-iron stove. A faded calendar remained on the wall, opened to August 1991. Upstairs, they found 4 bedrooms. One contained flowered wallpaper and a wooden rocking chair facing the window. Caleb coughed. Rachel turned immediately. His second cough was deeper. "We're leaving." "I'm okay." No arguments. By the time they reached the porch, he was wheezing again. Rachel guided him into fresh air and used the new inhaler she had finally purchased after borrowing $20 from Donna. His breathing steadied. Rachel sat beside him on the broken front steps, staring at the overgrown land. They could not sleep inside. They could not afford a hotel. She had spent every dollar she had on a house that might make her son sick. That night, they reclined the car seats and covered themselves with an emergency blanket. Crickets sang in the weeds. Somewhere beyond the orchard, a dog barked twice and fell silent. Caleb slept. Rachel did not. She stared at the dark outline of the farmhouse and allowed silent tears to slip into her hair. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though she did not know whether she was speaking to Caleb herself or the house. A pale light appeared in an upstairs window. Rachel sat upright. It moved slowly behind the glass, warm and golden, like a lantern being carried through the room. Then it vanished. The house had no electricity. At sunrise, the rumble of an engine woke her. An old green pickup stopped beside the Honda. A small woman with silver hair climbed out carrying a basket covered by a red checkered cloth. "Morning," she called. "Thought whoever bought this place might need breakfast." Rachel stepped from the car cautiously. The woman lifted the cloth, revealing biscuits wrapped in a towel, a thermos of coffee, and a jar of honey. "I'm Lottie Mae Dawson," she said. "I live about half a mile down the road. Rachel Bennett. This is my son, Caleb." Lottie Mae looked past them at the farmhouse. Her welcoming expression slowly faded. "You bought it then yesterday?" Lottie Mae remained silent long enough for Rachel to feel the first stir of dread. "Is something wrong?" The older woman tightened her grip on the basket. "Well," she said, her eyes fixed on the upstairs window, "I suppose somebody ought to tell you what happened to Dr. Evelyn Carter." Rachel looked from Lottie Mae Dawson to the farmhouse. The upper window, where she had seen the light, was dark now, reflecting only the pale morning sky. "What happened to her?" Rachel asked. Lottie Mae lowered the basket onto the hood of the Honda. Her fingers lingered on the red checkered cloth, as if she needed something solid beneath them. "Dr. Evelyn Carter disappeared in the summer of 1991, she said. "Walked into that house one evening and never came back out. At least that's what folks around here say." Caleb stood beside Rachel, holding his inhaler. "Did the police search for her?" "They searched some." Lottie Mae's mouth tightened. "Not enough." Rachel glanced toward the front door, still hanging slightly open from their visit the day before. "What do you mean she never came back out? Was someone watching the house? No one saw her leave. Her car was still parked behind the barn. Her purse was in the kitchen. Clothes in the closets. Food in the pantry. Even her shoes were lined up beside the back door." Lottie Mae looked at Caleb and softened her voice. "Some people decided she ran away. Others decided the house had taken her. Small towns can be quick to choose a story when the truth takes too much work." "Did you know her?" Rachel asked. "I did." The answer came quietly. Lottie Mae poured coffee into the thermos lid and handed it to Rachel. The coffee was strong and sweet, the way Rachel's grandmother used to make it. She had not realized how cold she was until the warmth touched her hands. "Evelyn came to Cedar Hollow from Raleigh," Lottie Mae continued. "She had more education than most people around here knew what to do with. Studied plants, chemistry, medicine, things with names I could never pronounce. But she never made folks feel foolish. If somebody's arthritis was acting up or a child had a rash, she'd listen like they were the only person in the world." "She was a doctor?" Caleb asked. "Not the kind who worked in a hospital. A scientist. A real one. She used to say the Lord put medicine in the earth long before people learned to put it in bottles." Rachel thought of the rusted pans in the kitchen, the calendar frozen on August 1991, and the faint golden light moving past the window. Why was the house left empty all this time? Her family tried to settle the property, but there were legal problems. Back taxes, missing papers. Then nobody wanted it. Not after the stories started. Lottie Mae uncovered the biscuits. Steam rose into the cool air. Rachel tore one in half and gave it to Caleb. He ate slowly, studying the farmhouse. "Do you think it's haunted?" he asked. Lottie Mae considered the question. "I think people leave pieces of themselves in places they love. Whether you call that memory or something else is between you and your maker." A truck rattled along the driveway before Rachel could ask another question. It was newer than Lottie Mae's, but far from polished, with ladders strapped to the rack and toolboxes lining the bed. The broad-shouldered man from the auction climbed out. A girl about Caleb's age followed him, her brown hair tied beneath a faded green baseball cap. Rachel recognized him immediately. "You bid against me." The man nodded. "Wade Hollis." He wiped his hand on his jeans before offering it. "This is my daughter, Sadie." Sadie gave a small wave. "Daddy said somebody finally bought the Carter place. Your father nearly made it cost more than every dollar I owned," Rachel said. Wade's expression turned uncomfortable. "I buy old properties sometimes. Fix them if they're worth fixing. I didn't know who you were when I raised my hand. What changed?" I looked back. Rachel waited. He nodded toward the Honda, where blankets and Caleb's backpack were visible through the windows. "You weren't bidding on lumber and land," he said. "You were bidding on somewhere to go." The bluntness of it made Rachel look away. Wade cleared his throat. "I brought tools. Thought I could tell you whether the place is dangerous or just ugly. I can't pay you. I didn't ask you to." Rachel's first instinct was to refuse. Pride rose quickly when money was gone. It was one of the few possessions poverty could not take unless she handed it over. Then she remembered Caleb struggling to breathe inside the house. "Just an inspection," she said. "Just an inspection." Wade walked the perimeter first. He tested porch supports, examined the foundation, and climbed halfway onto the roof before rain-softened shingles forced him back down. Sadie and Caleb remained in the yard. "You like plants?" Sadie asked him. "I don't know much about them." "I do. Some." She pointed toward a patch of purple flowers near the porch. "That's mountain mint. And the tall stuff near the fence is probably echinacea. It looks like weeds. Most useful plants do if nobody tells you what they are." They wandered toward the orchard, while Rachel stayed close enough to see them. Inside the house, Wade tapped walls, checked floorboards, and opened the old electrical panel. "That bad?" Rachel asked. He stared into the box. "Depends how much you enjoy fires." She folded her arms. "I prefer not having them. Then the power stays off until this is replaced." The plumbing was no better. Pipes beneath the kitchen sink had split. Water damage stained the ceilings. Mold darkened part of the wall behind an upstairs closet. Wade saved the foundation for last. He crouched beside the stonework beneath the rear of the house and pressed a screwdriver between two blocks. "Solid," he said. Rachel almost laughed. "That's the good news. That's very good news. Foundation's the part that can turn an old house into a lost cause. This one was built by people who expected it to outlive them. And the rest, the roof needs patching immediately and replacing eventually. Wiring is unsafe. Plumbing's mostly gone. Mold has to come out before Caleb spends any real time inside." Rachel looked through the kitchen doorway into the dusty front room. "How much?" Wade did not answer at once. "How much to make it safe if we do everything the proper way? Tens of thousands." Her stomach dropped. "I have $37. I figured it wasn't much." "Then why are you standing here like this can be fixed? Because fixed doesn't have to mean finished." He explained that a section of roof could be covered before the next rain. One room could be cleaned and sealed before the others. Donated materials could stretch farther than new ones. The county sometimes had weatherization programs, though Rachel's unusual purchase might complicate the paperwork. "It won't happen fast," he said, "but the bones of the house are good." Rachel ran her hand over the edge of the old kitchen table. "Good bones." People said that about houses when they wanted to believe ruin was temporary. Wade looked through the window toward the car. "You two sleep in there last night." Rachel said nothing. He took the silence as an answer. "I've got a camping trailer behind my workshop. It's old, but the roof doesn't leak. Stove works. Shower works if we can connect a clean water tank. No. It's sitting empty. I said I can't pay you, and I said I didn't ask. I don't accept charity from strangers. Wade's jaw tightened. Then don't call it charity. Call it a loan. What would I be borrowing time? Before Rachel could reply, Caleb called from the orchard. Mom, come look at this. Rachel and Wade pushed through waist-high grass to where Caleb and Sadie stood beside a crumbling stone border. The ground beyond it looked wild, but the plants grew in curved rows rather than random clumps. Sadie knelt beside one. This is golden seal, she said. I think. We learned about it through the county extension program. It likes shade. A little farther away, lavender pushed through tangles of vine. Rosemary had become woody and enormous. Mint spread between fallen stones. This was a garden, Caleb said. More than one, Sadie replied. See how the paths divide, somebody planned all this. Rachel looked across the overgrown land. For the first time, she did not see only neglect. Beneath the vines and briars lay a design that had survived 3 decades without anyone tending it. By noon, word of the new owner had traveled through Cedar Hollow. A retired school teacher arrived with bottled water. 2 brothers from the volunteer fire department brought a tarp large enough to cover the worst section of roof. A woman Rachel had never met left a box of canned vegetables and pimento cheese sandwiches on the porch. Rachel did not know whether to feel grateful or exposed. They're looking at us like we're a church project, she murmured. Lottie Mae handed her a glass of sweet tea. Honey, around here everybody becomes a church project sooner or later. A dark blue sedan came up the driveway shortly after 1 o'clock. A young woman in a sheriff's uniform stepped out. Her nameplate read, Ruiz. Rachel immediately reached for the deed packet. Are we doing something wrong? The deputy gave the gathered tools, food, and neighbors a quick survey. Someone reported people occupying an abandoned property. I own it. Rachel handed her the papers. Deputy Lena Ruiz read every page carefully. She compared the parcel number to something on her phone, then returned the packet. Looks legal to me. Relief loosened Rachel's shoulders. Do people call the sheriff every time someone buys a house? Not usually. Lena looked toward the road. But this house gets attention. Because Evelyn Carter disappeared. The deputy's eyes sharpened. You've heard. Enough to know I haven't heard everything. Lena lowered her voice. Take pictures of these documents. Take pictures of the house before you move or repair anything. Keep receipts. Old properties attract people who suddenly remember they wanted them after someone else starts doing the work. Is that a warning? It's practical advice. She glanced at Caleb. And until the mold is removed, keep your son outside as much as possible. Rachel nodded. He has asthma. I noticed the inhaler. Lena's face softened. My younger brother had it. Make sure you have a backup if you can. If you can. The words carried no judgment, which somehow made them hurt more. A weathered station wagon arrived while Lena was still there. An elderly black man stepped out wearing a straw hat, polished shoes, and a pale gray suit despite the heat. Lottie Mae smiled. Reverend Bell. Retired Reverend Bell, he corrected. I've been trying to get people to remember that for 6 years. No one appeared convinced. Reverend Josiah Bell introduced himself to Rachel, then stood facing the farmhouse with his hands resting on the top of a wooden cane. I knew Evelyn, he said. Not as well as Miss Lottie did, but enough to know the stories people told after she vanished were unkind. What stories that she practiced dark things, that she brought trouble here, that she disappeared because she had something to hide. He shook his head. People were more comfortable fearing a brilliant woman than admitting they had failed her. Caleb looked toward the upstairs window. My mom saw a light in there last night. Wade paused beside his toolbox. Lottie Mae became very still. Josiah did not laugh. Instead, he walked to the porch and placed one hand on a sagging column. Some places are not haunted by evil, he said. They are waiting for unfinished truth. The words settled over the yard. Rachel felt again the strange sensation she had experienced while watching the golden light, fear, but not the kind that told her to run. It was the feeling of standing before a locked door and knowing something on the other side had been waiting a very long time. By late afternoon, Wade's trailer had been pulled onto the property and parked beneath a cluster of oaks. It smelled faintly of cedar chips and motor oil, but it was clean. Sadie swept the narrow floor while Caleb arranged their blankets on the small bench that converted into a bed. Rachel found Wade connecting a portable water tank. You shouldn't be doing all this. Probably not. How am I supposed to pay you back? Get the place standing. Help somebody else when you can. The same thing the firefighter had said. Rachel looked across the yard at the people folding tarps, passing tools, and clearing a path to the porch. All her life she had believed survival meant carrying every burden without letting anyone see her struggle. Now strangers were teaching her another version of survival, one that required opening her hands instead of clenching them. That evening, they ate supper outside the trailer. Lottie Mae brought fried chicken and green beans. Reverend Bell contributed pound cake from the church kitchen. Wade repaired one of the trailer steps, while Sadie and Caleb argued over whether the oldest apple tree could still produce fruit. Battery-powered lights hung between two branches, casting a warm glow over the table. Caleb laughed when Sadie told him the wild mint would take over the entire county if no one stopped it. Rachel watched him. 24 hours earlier, he had been struggling to breathe in a car on the side of the road. Now he sat beneath an oak tree with grease on his fingers, listening to people tell stories about apple harvests and summer storms. The house behind them remained dark, but for the first time it did not look entirely empty. Over the following 2 days, Rachel worked mornings at the diner and spent every afternoon cleaning the farmhouse. She wore gloves and a respirator Wade gave her. Caleb stayed outside with Sadie, mapping the garden and marking plants with wooden stakes. Rachel started with the smallest upstairs bedroom. She chose it for Caleb because its windows faced the orchard. Once the mold was gone and the walls were repaired, morning sunlight would fill the room. She removed broken plaster-swept animal nests from the corners and carried rotting furniture down the stairs, one piece at a time. Near sunset on the second day, she dragged the wooden rocking chair away from the wall. One floorboard shifted beneath her foot. Rachel froze. She stepped on it again. The board dipped slightly, then rose. She knelt and brushed away the dust. Unlike the surrounding boards, this one had no visible nails. A narrow line ran around its edges. Using a screwdriver, she carefully pried it upward. Beneath it was a shallow cavity. A rectangular metal box rested inside, wrapped in oilcloth. Rachel's pulse quickened. She carried it to the window where the last light of the day fell across the tarnished lid. The latch opened without resistance. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, a stack of photographs tied with faded blue ribbon, a folded map, and a brass key smaller and more ornate than the one the county clerk had given her. The first page of the journal bore a name in precise handwriting. Dr. Evelyn Louise Carter, Cedar Hollow, North Carolina. Rachel turned the pages carefully. Early entries described the restoration of the farmhouse and plans for medicinal gardens. Evelyn wrote about soil acidity, mountain rainfall, and neighbors who came seeking help when they could not afford doctors. Other entries described her previous life in the Research Triangle. She had worked for a pharmaceutical research company near Raleigh. She left after becoming convinced that executives were hiding promising treatments until they could control the patents. Rachel read faster. The later entries changed in tone. Evelyn mentioned a visitor identified only as RV came again today. He increased his offer. He believes enough money can turn every conviction into a temporary inconvenience. He does not understand that this work was never meant to belong to one company. Rachel heard footsteps in the hall and nearly dropped the journal. Wade appeared in the doorway. "You all right?" She showed him the box. He crouched beside her while she unfolded the map. It depicted the farmhouse, orchard, gardens, well, and 3 outbuildings. 2 matched the collapsed barn and tool shed on the current survey. The third did not appear on any modern property document. A small square had been drawn beyond the orchard near the northern boundary of the land. Beside, Evelyn had written one word: laboratory. Wade studied the map. "I walked that side of the property yesterday. There's nothing out there but vines. Maybe there used to be." Rachel held up the smaller brass key. They called the others before darkness fell. Caleb carried the map while Sadie led them along the faint remains of an old path. Wade used pruning shears to cut through blackberry canes and wild grapevine. Reverend Bell followed with a flashlight, and Lottie Mae came behind him, despite everyone suggesting she remain near the trailer. The path ended at a wall of kudzu. Wade pushed aside a thick curtain of leaves. Brick appeared beneath it. They cleared more vines and uncovered a low structure built partly into the slope. It had no windows and no markings, only a narrow metal door darkened by rust. Rachel stepped forward. The key felt cold in her palm. For a moment, no one spoke. Then she inserted it into the lock. It turned with a smooth metallic click. The metal door resisted for one breath, then opened inward with a low scrape that sounded impossibly loud in the gathering dark. A smell of dust, dried leaves, and something faintly medicinal drifted from the room beyond. Rachel held the brass key tightly as Wade raised his flashlight. The beam moved across brick walls, metal shelving, glass jars, and a long wooden work table covered by a canvas sheet. Unlike the farmhouse, the hidden building had not collapsed beneath weather and neglect. Its walls were thick. Its roof appeared intact. No vines had broken through the ceiling, and no animal nests filled the corners. It was as if the room had sealed itself against time. Caleb leaned around Rachel. "Is that the lab?" "I think so." Sadie stepped closer, but Wade held out an arm. "Everybody stays behind me until we know the floor is safe." He entered first, testing each step. The concrete beneath his boots did not shift. He inspected the ceiling, the back wall, and a narrow ventilation grate before nodding. "Solid enough." Rachel followed him inside. The room was no larger than a small bedroom, yet every inch had been used with care. Shelves held amber bottles labeled in Evelyn's precise handwriting. Bundles of dried roots hung from hooks. Metal trays contained small envelopes of seeds. A microscope sat beneath a fitted cloth cover beside scales, glass tubes, and notebooks protected in waxed canvas. Reverend Bell stood in the doorway, his hat in both hands. "I knew she worked out here," he said softly, "but I never saw the inside." Lottie Mae touched one of the jars without lifting it. "She used to come to my house smelling like lavender and rubbing alcohol." Rachel drew back the canvas covering the work table. Beneath it lay a stainless steel surface marked by circles where bottles had once rested. A yellow legal pad sat open near the center. The top page contained rows of chemical symbols and measurements written in blue ink. Caleb peered at it. "Can you read that, some of it?" Rachel had not worked in a laboratory, but 8 years of nursing had taught her how to interpret medication records, dosage tables, and clinical shorthand. The page described tissue samples, inflammatory markers, and repeated exposure to a plant-derived compound identified only as EC17. The numbers meant little to her. The final note did not. Progression halted in 11 of 12 samples. Rachel read the sentence twice. "What does that mean?" Wade asked. "It means whatever she was testing did more than slow something down." Rachel looked across the table. It stopped it. A locked metal cabinet stood beneath the workbench. The small brass key fit that lock too. Inside were 6 black notes, several sealed envelopes, and a wooden case containing glass vials wrapped in cotton. Each notebook was marked with a year beginning in 1987 and ending in 1991. Rachel opened the final one. Carter Syndrome Research Protocol. She recognized the disease immediately. Carter syndrome was rare, but she had once cared for a retired schoolteacher diagnosed with it. The woman's immune system had attacked one organ after another. Treatments had bought her time, but none had offered recovery. She was studying Carter syndrome, Rachel said. Wade looked blank. A serious autoimmune disease. The body turns against itself. It can damage the liver, kidneys, heart, almost anything. There's no cure, wasn't Caleb said. Rachel looked at him. He pointed toward the notebook. Maybe there wasn't a cure before her. The possibility seemed too large for the little brick room. Rachel turned the pages. Evelyn had documented years of experiments using compounds extracted from plants she had cultivated in the garden. She had crossed local golden seal with a related medicinal variety, then refined one active compound until it reduced the destructive immune response without suppressing the entire system. There were charts, dates, photographs, blood test results, and references to outside physicians who had reviewed parts of the work. Near the back, Evelyn had written one sentence in capital letters. Repeatable response, 94%. Rachel felt the room tilt beneath her. 94%, she whispered. Is that good? Sadie asked. If the results are real, it's extraordinary. She continued reading. Evelyn had tested the compound on laboratory samples and a small number of patients under the supervision of 2 physicians. Symptoms had improved. Organ damage had stopped progressing. Side effects had been minor. This was not a folk remedy written in a kitchen notebook. It was a medical breakthrough. At the bottom of the cabinet, Rachel found an envelope addressed in black ink. To the person who finds this. She sat at the workbench and opened it carefully. The paper inside had yellowed at the edges, but Evelyn's handwriting remained dark and clear. If you are reading this, then I was unable to complete what I began. The research in this room may be worth more money than most people will ever see. That is precisely why it is in danger. The compound I developed could change the future for patients with Carter syndrome. It must never become a luxury available only to those who can afford it. I cannot know who will find these papers. I can only hope the right guardian will understand that saving lives matters more than owning a fortune. Rachel stopped there. The words seemed directed not to a stranger in the future, but to her. She thought of the $600 she had handed over at the courthouse. She thought of counting coins for gasoline, borrowing money for Caleb's inhaler, and pretending not to be hungry so he could finish dinner. A fortune could change everything. It could buy a clean house, reliable transportation specialists for Caleb, and enough security that she would never again fear an envelope taped to her front door. Wade watched her face. How much do you think this is worth? I don't know. Millions, maybe. Reverend Bell gave a quiet breath. Rachel folded the letter along its original crease. It isn't mine. You own the property, Wade said. That may give you some legal claim. I didn't say I don't have a claim. I said it isn't mine. She looked at the notebooks. This was Evelyn's work. If it can help people, that comes first. Caleb smiled faintly, as though she had passed a test he had never announced. Rachel continued reading the letter. Evelyn explained that she had hidden her most complete records in the laboratory after a former employer began pressuring her to surrender the research. She identified the company only as Carolina Meridian and the executive only by his initials RV. He has offered money, partnership, and prestige. When those failed, he began offering warnings. I do not trust what will happen if his company controls the formula. Please proceed carefully. By the time Rachel finished, darkness had settled outside. Wade locked the laboratory again. They carried only the final notebook and Evelyn's letter back to the trailer, leaving the other materials hidden. No one spoke loudly on the walk through the orchard. The land no longer seemed like an abandoned property. It felt watched. The following morning, Rachel drove to a library in the next town and used one of the public computers. She searched the name Carolina Meridian Pharmaceuticals. The company's website appeared first. Its headquarters stood in Research Triangle Park, nearly 2 hours away. The company employed thousands of people and sold medications around the world. Its annual revenue was measured in billions. Rachel searched its history. In 1991, the chairman and chief executive had been Richard Vail, RV. She found an archived newspaper article showing Vail in a dark suit accepting an award for pharmaceutical leadership. He was handsome in a cold, polished way, with silver at his temples and a smile that seemed rehearsed. Another article from 1990 described Carolina Meridian abandoning a treatment for Carter syndrome after unsuccessful trials. The company had reportedly lost tens of millions of dollars. Rachel sat back. The pieces fit too neatly. Carolina Meridian had failed. Evelyn had succeeded. Richard Vail had offered to purchase her work. She had refused. Then she had disappeared. Rachel called the only person she trusted to understand the science. Dr. Hannah Cho answered on the fourth ring. Rachel Bennett, she said warmly. I heard the clinic finally shut down. I've been meaning to call you. I need your help. Hannah heard something in her voice and stopped making conversation. What happened? I found medical research in an abandoned house. There was a pause. You found what Rachel explained as much as she could without sounding irrational. She described Evelyn the hidden laboratory, the notebooks, and the data on Carter syndrome. Hannah asked precise questions about dates, study methods, and terminology. Rachel read several passages from the final notebook. The silence on the other end changed. It was no longer skeptical. Do not bring those originals anywhere, Hannah said. Are the results possible? Possible, yes. Proven, no. I would need to examine everything. But the methodology you're describing is sophisticated. Far more sophisticated than most independent research from that period. The response rate says 94%. If that can be verified, it could be one of the most important autoimmune discoveries in decades. Rachel looked around the library. An elderly man read a newspaper near the front desk. A child colored at a small table while her mother browsed the shelves. The ordinary world continued around her. What do I do? Make copies? Store them in separate places? Tell very few people. And Rachel, do not contact Carolina Meridian. I wasn't planning to. Good. I have a colleague at Duke who specializes in autoimmune research. I can ask her to review scanned pages confidentially. Rachel lowered her voice. How much could something like this be worth? Hannah hesitated. A successful treatment for a disease with no cure. Potentially billions. Rachel closed her eyes. The number should have felt like salvation. Instead, it felt like danger. When she returned to Cedar Hollow, Reverend Bell was waiting beside the trailer with an old cardboard archive box. I spent the morning at the church, he said. Thought you might want to see these. Inside were fellowship committee minutes, donation records, and handwritten notes from the late 1980s. Evelyn's name appeared repeatedly. Paid heating bill for Dawson family. Anonymous. Delivered medicine to Mr. Green. Anonymous. Purchased groceries for widow on Carter Mill Road. She never wanted credit, Josiah said, even when she was the reason half this county got through a hard winter. Lottie Mae read one of the notes and covered her mouth. She paid my electric bill, she whispered. I never knew. At the bottom of the box was a photograph taken during a church picnic. Evelyn stood beneath an oak tree, tall and elegant, laughing at something outside the frame. Her eyes were striking, one dark brown, the other pale gray-blue. Caleb studied the picture. She looks happy. She was, Lottie Mae said, until those cars started coming. What cars? Rachel asked. Black sedans, expensive ones. Didn't belong on these roads. They came 3 or 4 times that spring. Reverend Bell nodded. I remember one parked outside the church while Evelyn spoke to a man near the cemetery. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my first car. Richard Vale, Rachel said. Lottie Mae's expression changed. You found his name before Rachel could answer. A black sedan turned into the driveway. Every conversation stopped. The car parked near the porch. A tall man in a tan suit stepped out carrying a leather folder. He smiled as he approached. Ms. Bennett. Rachel moved slightly in front of Caleb. Yes. My name is Thomas Wynn. I'm with the county assessor's office. He offered a business card. The seal looked official. So did the county address. What does the assessor's office want? There appear to be irregularities involving the auction of this property. Rachel felt the old panic return. What irregularities? Notification requirements may not have been met. There is also a question concerning the classification of several structures on the parcel. Wade came around the side of the house, wiping his hands on a rag. What structures? Wynn glanced toward him. This is a private matter. It's happening on my job site. I didn't hire you, Rachel said quietly. Close enough. Wynn's smile thinned. The county may need to suspend your occupancy while the matter is reviewed. I have a legal deed, and I'm sure this can be resolved. To avoid a lengthy dispute, the county is prepared to offer you $25,000 in exchange for surrendering the property. Rachel stared at him. She had paid $600 3 days earlier. No county gave away $25,000 to correct paperwork. Why would the county care that much about an abandoned farmhouse? It is a standard settlement. No, it isn't. Deputy Ruiz arrived less than 20 minutes after Rachel called her. Wynn had already left, saying he would return with formal documents. Lena examined the business card. I know everyone in the assessor's office, she said. There's no Thomas Wynn. She called the printed number. A recorded message said the line had been disconnected. Lena looked toward the farmhouse, then toward the orchard. Did you find something here? Rachel hesitated. Wade, Reverend Bell, and Lottie Mae remained silent. Lena slipped the card into an evidence envelope. You don't have to tell me everything, she said. But whoever sent this man believes you found something worth more than $25,000. Rachel met her eyes. I found Evelyn Carter's research. The deputy did not laugh. What kind of research? The kind Carolina Meridian Pharmaceuticals tried to buy before she disappeared. Lena's face became guarded. Secure it somewhere else. Tonight. An hour before sunset, another vehicle appeared. This time it was a black SUV with tinted windows. A woman stepped out wearing a cream-colored suit and low heels that sank slightly into the soft ground. Her dark hair was smooth, her jewelry understated, and her expression carefully pleasant. Rachel Bennett. Rachel stayed on the porch. Yes. I'm Victoria Vale, Vice President of Research Acquisitions for Carolina Meridian Pharmaceuticals. The name landed like a stone. Richard Vale's daughter, Rachel thought. Or perhaps his daughter. Victoria looked at the farmhouse with practiced interest. Our company has a historical connection to this property. We understand Dr. Carter conducted research here using botanical specimens of potential value. You understand that after 35 years, we recently became aware that the property changed ownership. Small-town news travels fast. Victoria smiled. Corporate news travels faster. She opened a slim folder. Carolina Meridian is prepared to offer you $250,000 for the property, including all structures and contents. Caleb stood inside the front doorway behind Rachel. For one dangerous second, she imagined saying yes. $250,000. Enough for a modest house. Enough to replace the Honda. Enough to pay medical bills and breathe without calculating every dollar. Then she remembered Evelyn's letter. The right guardian will understand that saving lives matters more than owning a fortune. The house isn't for sale, Rachel said. Victoria's smile held. You should discuss this with an attorney. I will. Our offer expires in 48 hours. So does my answer. Victoria closed the folder. Her gaze shifted toward Caleb. A property like this can become a heavy burden for a mother already carrying too much. Rachel stepped down from the porch. Are you threatening me? Not at all. I'm suggesting that security has value. So does the truth. For the first time, Victoria's expression changed. Only slightly. But enough. She returned to the SUV without another word. That night, Wade moved the notebooks to a locked safe in his workshop. Rachel photographed every page with Lena's help and sent copies to Dr. Cho. By midnight, the property was quiet. Rachel woke sometime before dawn to the sound of metal striking stone. She stepped from the trailer and saw movement near the old well. Who's there? A figure ran toward the trees. Rachel shouted for Wade, who had stayed in his truck nearby. They reached the well together. Its heavy protective cap had been removed and thrown into the grass. A sharp chemical odor rose from the darkness below. Wade swept his flashlight across the bushes. The beam stopped on an empty industrial container lying beside the stone wall. Rachel stared at this warning symbol printed on its side. Then she looked toward the trailer where Caleb was sleeping. Someone had poisoned their water. Rachel stood beside the open well while the chemical smell rose from the darkness. For several seconds, she could not move. The trailer sat less than 50 yards away. Caleb was asleep inside, wrapped in the blue quilt Lottie May had brought from home. His drinking glass still rested beside the sink. The night before, Rachel had filled it from the trailer faucet and watched him take his asthma medicine. Her stomach turned. Don't touch anything, Wade said. He pulled her back from the stone wall and used his phone to photograph the missing cap, the disturbed soil, and the empty container in the weeds. A red diamond on the label warned that the contents were corrosive. Rachel stared toward the tree line where the figure had disappeared. They knew he was here. Wade followed her gaze. We don't know who it was. They knew a child was drinking this water. Her voice broke on the final word. Wade's expression hardened. Wake Caleb. You're both coming to my place. Rachel wanted to argue. Leaving felt like surrender, and surrender was exactly what Victoria Vale expected. Then she imagined Caleb turning on the faucet. She ran. Caleb woke confused and frightened as Rachel pulled clothes from the trailer cabinets and shoved them into a grocery bag. Mom, what happened? Someone put something in the well. He sat upright. Was it poison? We don't know yet. Her answer came too quickly. Caleb saw through it. Wade drove them to his house while Rachel followed in the Honda. His home stood on a wooded ridge 10 minutes away, a modest brick ranch with a detached workshop and a porch light that burned through the darkness. Sadie appeared in the doorway wearing flannel pajama pants and one of Wade's oversized sweatshirts. What's wrong? Get some blankets, Wade said. They're staying here. Sadie looked at Caleb once and stopped asking questions. She led him inside. Rachel remained on the porch until Wade touched her shoulder. He's safe here. The words came out sharper than she intended. Wade did not flinch. My workshop has cameras. The doors are reinforced. I've got neighbors on both sides, and Sadie knows not to open anything for strangers. Rachel pressed both hands against her face. I brought him to that property. I spent everything we had on it. Now somebody is willing to poison him because of what I found. You didn't poison the well. I put him close enough for them to try. Wade waited until she lowered her hands. You also found something powerful people wanted buried. That isn't your shame to carry. By sunrise, Deputy Lena Ruiz was at the property with a county environmental officer and a state hazardous materials technician. The well water tested positive for an industrial solvent used to clean laboratory equipment. The concentration was high enough to make the water unsafe. Lena photographed everything herself. Sheriff Danner arrived near 8. He was a heavy-set man in his late 50s with a broad face and a campaign pin still attached to the visor of his cruiser. He listened while Rachel explained the figure near the well, then looked toward the orchard. You sure it wasn't some teenager? Rachel stared at him. A teenager carrying industrial solvent at 4 in the morning. Kids get into all kinds of things. Someone impersonated a county employee yesterday. Then a pharmaceutical executive offered me $250,000. Hours later, somebody poisoned my water. Danner slipped his thumbs into his belt. That offer doesn't prove a crime. The well does. It proves vandalism. It proves someone knew we were living there. His expression changed only slightly. We'll look into it. Rachel had heard that phrase before. She had heard it from property managers, billing departments, insurance representatives, and administrators who wanted a frightened woman to leave quietly. Lena stood beside the well writing in her notebook. She did not look at the sheriff. That afternoon, she came to Wade's house alone. Rachel met her in the workshop where Evelyn's notebooks were locked inside a steel gun safe Wade had inherited from his father. Lena closed the door behind her. I filed the well contamination as intentional tampering, she said. Sheriff Danner changed the preliminary classification to suspected trespass and vandalism. Why he says there isn't enough evidence to connect it to your property dispute. Do you believe that no? The answer came without hesitation. Lena placed a folded sheet of paper on the workbench. It showed campaign contributions made during the previous county election. 3 donations came from consulting firms Rachel did not recognize. All 3 companies share a registered agent with a law firm used by Carolina Meridian, Lena said. They gave Danner's campaign almost $18,000. Is that illegal? Not by itself, but it explains why he doesn't want to see a connection. It might. Lena glanced toward the locked safe. I can't accuse my sheriff of corruption because I dislike his decisions. But I can tell you not to rely on the department as your only protection. Rachel thought of Evelyn's letter. Please proceed carefully. How far does their influence? I don't know, Lena said. That's what worries me. The call came that evening while Rachel sat at Wade's kitchen table. Sadie and Caleb were in the living room playing cards. Wade stood at the stove stirring a pot of chili. The ordinary warmth of the scene felt borrowed, as if Rachel had stepped into another family's life and did not know how long she would be allowed to remain. Her phone displayed an unknown number. She nearly ignored it. Rachel Bennett, the man's voice was smooth and older. Yes. My name is Richard Vale, Jr. I believe you met my sister. Wade stopped stirring. Rachel put the phone on speaker. I met Victoria. She tells me you declined a very generous proposal. The house isn't for sale. This is no longer about the house. Caleb looked up from his cards. Rachel rose and carried the phone into the hallway. What is it about research materials that belong to Carolina Meridian Pharmaceuticals? They belonged to Dr. Evelyn Carter. Dr. Carter used knowledge funding and proprietary methods developed during her employment with our company. Then why did your father try to buy them from her silence? Only a second. But enough to tell Rachel the question had landed. My father tried to resolve a complicated legal issue privately, Vale said. I'm willing to do the same. How much is the truth worth to you? $1 million? Rachel gripped the phone. Vale continued before she could respond. $1 million in cash consideration for the property and all materials recovered there. We will also arrange a home for you in the county of your choice. Cover your son's medical insurance for 10 years and ensure that no legal action is taken against you for possessing confidential research. The hallway seemed to narrow around her. $1 million. Not an abstract fortune, a real one. A house without mold. A car that did not stall in storms. Every inhaler Caleb would ever need. Specialists in Charlotte or Durham. College tuition. A savings account large enough to survive anything. You poisoned our well, Rachel said. I have no idea what you're talking about. Someone did. Then I'm sorry to hear it. Another reason to consider leaving an unsafe property. His tone remained polite. That made the threat worse. Think about what security means to a woman in your position, he continued. You can spend years fighting people with greater resources than you will ever possess, or you can protect your child. Rachel saw Caleb on the roadside struggling to breathe. Do not talk about my son. I'm talking about his future. The call ended after Vale gave her until noon the following day. Rachel remained in the hallway. $1 million. She hated herself for wanting it. Wade found her standing there. You don't have to decide tonight. Yes, I do. No. That's what he wants. He wants panic making the choice. What if he's right? Wade frowned. What if I can't protect Caleb from this? What if the next person doesn't just poison an empty well? What if they come to school? What if they follow him to the doctor? You think selling will make people like that harmless? I think $1 million could put us far away from them. Wade leaned against the wall. It could. She looked at him surprised. I'm not going to tell you money doesn't matter, he said. People say that when they've never had to choose between medicine and rent. His understanding made the decision harder. That night, Rachel lay awake on the sofa. Rain ticked lightly against the windows. She pictured a small, clean house with a fenced yard. Caleb running inside without a mask. A refrigerator full of food. Bills paid before their due dates. A life without borrowed trailers, emergency envelopes, or shame. By morning, she had nearly convinced herself. The research would still exist. Carolina Meridian might develop the treatment. Perhaps Evelyn had been too suspicious. Perhaps Rachel had no right to risk her child for the wishes of a woman who had died before Caleb was born. She found him at the kitchen table eating toast. "I need to ask you something." Caleb studied her face. "The man on the phone offered us money, didn't he?" Rachel sat across from him. "A lot." "How much? $1 million. His eyes widened. "We could buy a real house." "Yes." "And fix your car." "Yes." "And you wouldn't have to work 2 jobs, probably not." He looked down at his plate. Rachel waited. "I want you to tell me the truth," she said. "Would you be angry if I accepted no?" The answer relieved and disappointed her at once. Caleb rubbed a crumb between his fingers. "But I think you'd be angry. At yourself." Rachel's throat tightened. He raised his eyes. "You bought the house so nobody could take our home. If we sell the truth, they still take it. They just pay us first." For a moment, neither of them moved. Caleb was 12. He should have been thinking about school basketball and whether Sadie liked him more than she admitted. Instead, he understood the cost of surrender more clearly than Rachel did. She reached across the table and took his hand. "I don't know how to keep you safe. Maybe safe isn't the same as running." The words did not remove her fear. They gave it a direction. Rachel called Richard Vale at 11:47. "My answer is no. You are making an emotional mistake." "No. I almost made one. You have no idea what you're inviting into your life. I know what you already brought into it." She ended the call before he could respond. Then she began making copies. Dr. Hannah Cho created an encrypted storage account for the scientific records. Lena photographed the threatening letters and documented the false assessor. Wade's cousin, Andrea Hollis, agreed to hold sealed copies at her law office. Reverend Bell placed one duplicate of Evelyn's letter in the church safe. "If one person holds the truth, that person can be silenced," Rachel said. "If 10 people hold it, they have a problem." Reverend Bell smiled faintly. Evelyn would approve. He had brought the old church archive box again. While Rachel sorted photographs, Josiah studied Evelyn's journal. "There's something odd about these numbers," he said. He pointed to several entries written in the margins. 314, 107, 281. They don't match dates or measurements. "Could be page references," Caleb suggested. To what Sadie asked. Josiah looked toward the archive box. Inside lay an old Broadman hymnal used by the Cedar Hollow Baptist Church in the 1980s. He opened it to hymn 314. First word is where. Page 107 began with thee. Page 281 began with oldest. They worked through every number. The message emerged one word at a time. Where the oldest apple faces north, the witness waits below. By late afternoon, they were back at the orchard. The oldest apple tree stood near the center, its trunk split by lightning, but still alive. Caleb used the compass on Lena's phone to find the northern side. Sadie spotted a flat stone buried beneath leaves. Wade dug carefully. 2 feet down, his shovel struck metal. They uncovered a waterproof case wrapped in heavy plastic. Inside were photographs, copies of Carolina Meridian letters, a videotape labeled Testimony, and a sealed envelope containing a hand-drawn map. The map showed a section of state forest roughly 30 miles west. Coordinates were written beneath a red circle. Rachel opened Evelyn's final note. If this has been found, then Richard Vale has likely succeeded in silencing me. The enclosed recording contains my account of his threats. The location marked on the map holds the evidence that will prove what happened if I am no longer here to speak. Do not trust appearances of authority. Take the truth beyond Cedar Hollow. A vehicle raced up the driveway. Then another. Two men stepped out of a white utility truck. One carried a folder. Court-authorized property recovery, he announced. We're here to secure materials belonging to Carolina Meridian Pharmaceuticals. Lena moved between them and the orchard. Show me the order. The man handed her a document. She read the first page, then looked at the seal. This judge retired 4 years ago. The man's expression changed. Wade stepped closer. Lena folded the paper. You're both being detained for attempted theft and presenting fraudulent legal documents. The second man moved toward the truck. Lena's hand dropped to her holster. Don't. He stopped. The first thunder rolled across the foothills as she called for assistance. By the time Sheriff Danner arrived, dark clouds had swallowed the western sky. He spoke privately with Lena, his voice sharp enough to carry. Then he approached Rachel, holding a different folder. This one is real, he said. Rachel read the heading. Emergency injunction. The county judge had suspended her right to occupy the property while alleged ownership irregularities were reviewed. You have until 9 tomorrow morning to vacate, Danner said. Who requested this? I'm delivering the order. Carolina Meridian. His refusal to answer was answer enough. Rachel looked toward the orchard where Wade had hidden the waterproof case beneath his jacket. Rain began to strike the leaves. The state forest was 30 miles away. Evelyn's note said the evidence there could prove what happened to her. By morning, Rachel would be legally barred from returning. And if Carolina Meridian knew about the orchard, they might already know about the forest. She folded the injunction and looked at Wade. We go tonight. Rain swept across the orchard in silver sheets as Rachel hurried toward Wade's truck. The injunction crackled inside her jacket pocket. By 9 in the morning, the law would treat her as a trespasser on the property she had purchased with every dollar she owned. By morning, Carolina Meridian might have men at the farmhouse, inside the laboratory beneath the apple tree, and anywhere else Evelyn had hidden the truth. Rachel climbed into the passenger seat and pulled the door shut. Wade started the engine. You certain about this? No. Good. Means you understand what can go wrong. Deputy Lena Ruiz stood beside her cruiser, speaking rapidly into her phone. She had moved far enough from Sheriff Danner that the rain masked most of her words. Rachel could still hear fragments. State Bureau of Investigation. Evidence tampering. Possible homicide. Sending files now. Danner waited near the porch, watching her. When Lena ended the call, he approached. You're done here, he said. Hand over the evidence and go home. I sent copies to a state investigator, Lena replied. His face tightened. You had no authority to do that. I preserved evidence connected to a possible felony. You don't know that a crime occurred. Someone poisoned a well-sent man with fraudulent court papers and used a judge's office to remove a legal owner from her property. I know enough. Danner lowered his voice. Think carefully about your career. Lena removed her rain-soaked sheriff's hat. I am. She walked to Rachel's side of the truck. I'm coming with you. Danner stepped into her path. You leave this county on an unofficial search, you surrender your badge. Lena looked at the metal star pinned to her uniform. Then she unclipped it and placed it in his hand. I'd rather lose the badge than forget what it was for. For the first time, Danner had no answer. Rachel found Lottie Mae Reverend Bell Caleb and Sadie gathered beneath the trailer awning. Caleb's face was pale. "You said we were leaving together. You're going to Lottie Mae's house with Sadie and Reverend Bell. I can help." "You already did." Rachel placed both hands on his shoulders. "You helped me understand what the house was worth. Now I need you to do the hardest thing I could ask. Stay somewhere safe while I finish this." Lightning flashed beyond the trees. Caleb looked toward Wade's truck, then back at her. "Promise you'll come back." Rachel wanted to say the words easily. She could not. "I will do everything in my power to come back." He wrapped his arms around her. She held him longer than she meant to. When Rachel finally pulled away, Reverend Bell placed a hand on her shoulder. "Fear is loudest when truth is close," he said. "Do not mistake the noise for power." Lottie Mae pressed a thermos into Wade's hand and a folded quilt into Rachel's. "Mountain roads turn cold after dark," she said. Then she leaned closer. "Bring Evelyn home." The state forest began where the farmland ended. Pavement narrowed to gravel, then to a muddy service road beneath a canopy of oak pine and tulip poplar. Water rushed through roadside ditches. Fallen branches forced Wade to stop twice and drag them aside. Lena sat behind Rachel, studying the hand-drawn map beneath the glow of her flashlight. "The coordinates are close," she said. "Maybe another mile." Wade slowed as the road dipped sharply. The truck slid sideways. Rachel grabbed the dashboard while Wade corrected the wheel and brought them to a stop inches from a drainage ditch. "You all right?" he asked. Rachel nodded. Her heartbeat said otherwise. They continued on foot when the road became impassable. Wade carried a shovel and crowbar. Lena carried a flashlight first aid kit and the personal handgun she was licensed to use even without her badge. Rachel held Evelyn's map inside a plastic sleeve. The storm weakened as they climbed. Rain still fell from the trees, but the thunder moved east toward the foothills. After 20 minutes, Lena stopped beside a moss-covered marker. "This is it." At first, Rachel saw only forest. Then Wade swept his light across a low stone wall hidden beneath mountain laurel. A roofless spring house stood against the slope. Water trickled through a narrow channel beneath collapsed timbers. The structure looked older than the farmhouse, perhaps built by one of the first families to settle the land. Rachel stepped inside. The map showed an X near the eastern wall. Wade examined the stones. "This section has been reset." He fitted the crowbar into a gap and leaned his weight against it. One stone shifted, then another. Behind them was a narrow hollow in the earth, containing a metal case wrapped in black plastic. Rachel knelt. The case was heavy. Its locking mechanism had rusted, but Wade broke it open with the crowbar. Inside were sealed notebooks, photographic negatives, Evelyn's passport, copies of correspondence with physicians, and several small tape cartridges protected in plastic. A paper envelope lay on top. Rachel recognized Evelyn's handwriting. "My name is Dr. Evelyn Louise Carter. If these materials are found without me, assume I was prevented from leaving Cedar Hollow by my own choice." Rachel's hands trembled. The letter described Richard Vale's final visit. Evelyn believed he intended to destroy the laboratory and force her to reveal where she had placed duplicate research. She had recorded their conversations. She had also named a Carolina Meridian security officer, Thomas Garrick, who accompanied Vale to the property. "Someone else was there," Lena said. "A living witness, maybe." After 35 years, Wade asked, "People carry secrets longer than that." Rachel turned the letter over. One final sentence had been written along the bottom. "If I am not Search where the spring water turns toward the old chestnut. They left the spring house and followed the narrow water channel downhill. The chestnut was dead, but still standing, its pale trunk split open by age. 20 feet beyond it, Wade stopped. The beam from his flashlight rested on a shallow depression in the earth. Rachel knew before anyone spoke. "No," she whispered. Wade handed Lena the shovel. Lena crouched and examined the ground without disturbing it. "We stop here. Evelyn could be under there. That's why we stop. If this is a burial site, trained investigators need to recover it properly." Rachel stared at the depression. For 35 years, people had called Evelyn unstable, secretive, cursed, or simply gone. All that time she had been waiting beneath Carolina clay. A branch snapped uphill. Lena turned off her flashlight. Wade pulled Rachel behind the chestnut. Headlights moved through the trees. A vehicle had reached the service road behind them. Then another. Voices carried through the rain. "They followed us," Wade whispered. Lena drew her weapon, but kept it pointed at the ground. "We don't know that." A man stepped into the clearing with a flashlight raised. "We know you're there," he called. "There's no reason for this to become difficult." Rachel recognized him. I was one of the men Lena had detained with the fraudulent court order. He should have been in custody. Sheriff Danner must have released him. 2 other men emerged behind him. One wore a dark raincoat. The other carried a hard-sided case. "Give us the materials," the first man said. "You can walk away." Lena stepped into view. Stay where you are." The men paused. "You're outside your jurisdiction, deputy. Not a deputy tonight. Then you have no authority. I have the same authority as any citizen to defend myself and others from an armed threat." The man in the raincoat moved his hand beneath the front of his jacket. Lena raised her weapon. "Show me both hands." He did not. Wade positioned himself between Rachel and the men. The first man looked past him. "Ms. Bennett, you have no idea what you're holding. Those documents belong to Carolina Meridian. They belonged to Evelyn. Dr. Carter stole proprietary research. Then why did Richard Vale offer her millions of dollars for it?" His expression hardened. "Give us the case." Rachel removed her phone from her pocket. "I photographed every page before we left the spring house." That was not true, but he did not know it. "The files have gone to a state investigator, a medical researcher, an attorney, and a reporter," she continued. "You can take this case. You can burn it. You can bury me beside Evelyn. It won't bury the truth." For the first time, uncertainty moved through the group. The man in the raincoat suddenly reached inside his jacket. Lena shouted. He pulled a handgun. Before he could raise it, Wade struck his wrist with the shovel handle. The weapon fell into the... Lena kicked it away and forced the man face down. The others stepped back. Then another voice came through the trees. "Lena, lower your weapon." Sheriff Danner emerged with 2 uniformed deputies. Relief almost reached Rachel before she saw where Danner aimed his flashlight. Not at the armed man, at Lena. "Turn over the case," he ordered. Lena kept one knee against the man's back. He brought a concealed weapon to an active evidence site. "I said turn it over." "To you or to them?" Danner's face reddened. "You surrendered your badge. You are interfering with a lawful property recovery." "There is no lawful recovery order. There is now." He produced a folded paper. Rachel almost laughed. Another document. Another seal. Another piece of authority arranged to protect powerful men. Lena looked at the deputies behind Danner. "Did either of you verify that order?" Neither answered. Did either of you know Danner released these men after they presented fraudulent documents? One deputy lowered his eyes. Danner took a step forward. I am placing all three of you under arrest. A helicopter passed somewhere beyond the ridge. Its sound grew louder. White light swept across the treetops. Danner looked up. Lena smiled without humor. I told you I sent the evidence to the state. Vehicles approached from the opposite side of the service road. Blue lights flashed through the woods. State Bureau of Investigation agents entered the clearing, followed by forest rangers and county emergency personnel from a neighboring jurisdiction. Everything changed quickly after that. The armed men were detained. Sheriff Danner was separated from his deputies and ordered to surrender his weapon. The spring house was secured. The depression near the chestnut was marked as a protected scene. Rachel gave her statement beneath the plastic shelter while dawn slowly lightened the forest. An agent named Marcus Hale sat across from her with a recorder between them. You believe the remains may belong to Dr. Carter, I do. And you believe Richard Vale was involved in her disappearance. I believe Evelyn did. Hale studied. You've taken serious risks to bring this forward. Rachel looked toward the sealed evidence case. Evelyn did the brave work first. I simply refused to let it remain buried. The recovery team worked through the morning. Shortly before noon, Hale returned. His expression told Rachel the answer before he spoke. They found human remains. Rachel closed her eyes. Can they identify her? It will take formal testing. But personal effects found with the remains include jewelry matching photographs of Dr. Carter. Lottie Mae had once described Evelyn's silver bracelet, a gift from her mother in Jamaica. Rachel felt no triumph, only grief. The truth had been found, but so had the cost of it. By afternoon, Dr. Hannah Cho called. Her voice trembled with urgency. The scientific files are authentic enough to justify immediate independent review. And there's something else. I contacted Catherine Wells, an investigative reporter. She has covered Carolina Meridian for years. I gave her only documents you authorized me to share. Rachel looked at Lena. Is that safe? No, Hannah said. But secrecy isn't safe anymore either. The story went live before sunset. The headline spread across phones, televisions, and national news sites. Single mother uncovers hidden medical research linked to missing North Carolina scientist. Within hours, former Carolina Meridian employees began contacting the reporter. One name mattered most: Thomas Garrick. He was 76, living in Florida, and dying of cancer. After seeing Evelyn's photograph on the news, he called federal investigators and confessed that he had accompanied Richard Vale to the farmhouse in 1991. Vale struck Evelyn during an argument. Garrick helped move her body and bury it in the forest. In return, Carolina Meridian paid him for decades and threatened his family whenever he considered speaking. He provided dates, internal records, and the location of a private account used to fund the cover-up. Federal agents arrested Richard Vale Sr. at his estate outside Raleigh. Richard Vale Jr. and Victoria Vale were questioned about intimidation, destruction of evidence, and efforts to seize Evelyn's research. Carolina Meridian's board placed both on immediate leave as the company's stock fell. Sheriff Danner was suspended pending an investigation into bribery and obstruction. Rachel did not celebrate any of it. She wanted only to go home. The emergency injunction was dissolved that evening after the state attorney general challenged its legal basis. A judge from another district confirmed that Rachel's purchase was valid and ordered local officials not to interfere with her possession of the property. Wade drove her back to Cedar Hollow after dark. As they turned onto Carter Mill Road, Rachel saw cars parked along both sides. Neighbors stood beneath umbrellas. The volunteer firefighters had brought portable generators. Electricians from 3 counties had donated materials and spent the afternoon replacing the most dangerous wiring in the front section of the house. Warm light glowed through the downstairs windows. Rachel covered her mouth. Lottie Mae stood on the porch with Caleb Sadie and Reverend Bell. Caleb ran down the steps before the truck fully stopped. Rachel barely had time to open the door before he reached her. She held him against her breathing, in the familiar scent of his shampoo and rain-damp sweatshirt. "You came back," he said. "I promised I'd try." He took her hand and led her toward the house. The front room had been swept clean. The broken window was temporarily covered. A new lamp stood beside the old stone fireplace, filling the room with soft yellow light. Caleb looked around, as if seeing the place for the first time. "It looks like somebody lives here now." Rachel looked at Wade. Lottie Mae Sadie, Reverend Bell Lena, and all the neighbors gathered behind them. Then she looked at her son. "Somebody does." 6 months later, morning light poured through the farmhouse windows and spread across the restored heart pine floors in long golden bands. Rachel stood at the kitchen counter rolling biscuit dough beneath her palms while a bluegrass program played softly on the radio. The old cast-iron stove had been cleaned and polished, though Wade had insisted on installing a modern range beside it. A pot of coffee warmed near the window. Outside, frost silvered the garden paths, and smoke rose from the chimney for the first time in more than 30 years. The house was not finished. The upstairs bathroom still needed tile. 2 bedrooms waited for fresh paint. One side of the porch leaned slightly, despite Wade's repeated promises that he would straighten it before winter. But the roof no longer leaked. The walls were clean. The wiring was safe, and every room smelled of wood soap coffee and something alive. Caleb came into the kitchen wearing socks and carrying one sneaker. "Have you seen the other one?" Rachel pointed toward the back door. "It was beside your muddy boots last night." He opened the door and found the missing shoe exactly where she had said. "You know everything," he said. "Only the things you leave in obvious places." His inhalers rested in a labeled drawer beside a written asthma plan from his new doctor in Winston-Salem. Rachel no longer kept emergency medication hidden in her purse because there were now backups in the kitchen, Caleb's backpack, Wade's truck, and the school office. His breathing had improved since they moved into the cleaned and repaired house. The dry rooms, filtered air, and regular medical care had made a greater difference than any mysterious cure. Rachel refused to let anyone turn that improvement into a miracle claim. The real miracle was having the resources to care for him properly. Caleb pulled on his shoe. "Sadie says we have to be at the orchard by 9. You have school. It's Saturday." Rachel paused with the biscuit cutter in her hand. "That explains why you aren't complaining about being late." He grinned and reached for a piece of raw dough. She slapped his fingers lightly. "Wait until they're baked." The screen door opened, and Lottie Mae Dawson entered without knocking, carrying 2 jars of apple butter and a covered dish. "I brought breakfast," she announced. Rachel looked at the biscuits already rising in the oven. "So did I." "Then we have enough." Lottie Mae placed the dish on the table and removed the lid. Beneath it were slices of country ham arranged in careful rows. Wade followed her inside with a toolbox under one arm. "You two starting without me." "You have your own house," Rachel said. "Not one with biscuits." He set the toolbox near the porch door. For months, Wade had arrived almost every morning with some reason to be there. A loose hinge, a stubborn window, a shelf that needed leveling, a porch board that might become dangerous if ignored for another 30 years. Rachel had stopped pretending she believed all of his excuses. He poured coffee into one of the two blue mugs she kept on the counter. The first time she had placed both mugs there, neither of them had mentioned it. After that, they simply became part of the kitchen. Wade took a sip and looked toward the back porch. "I'm installing the swing today. You said that 3 weeks ago. I was waiting for the right hardware. You built a barn in less time. A barn doesn't have to impress anybody." Lottie Mae looked between them and smiled to herself. Rachel pretended not to notice. Beyond the kitchen windows, the former Carter property had changed almost as much as the house. Volunteers had cleared the main garden paths while preserving the medicinal plants that had survived years of neglect. Botanical specialists from 2 North Carolina universities had identified rare hybrids Evelyn developed before her death. Some existed nowhere else. The old laboratory remained locked except during scheduled research visits. Its equipment had been documented, preserved, and transferred into the care of the nonprofit Rachel had created with Dr. Hannah Cho, Reverend Bell, and several medical ethicists. They called it the Evelyn Carter Foundation. The name appeared on a new wooden sign near the road. Beneath it, smaller letters read, "Rural Health, Ethical Research, Medicine Within Reach." The foundation operated from a renovated section of the old barn. 2 mornings each week, a nurse practitioner offered free basic health screenings. Volunteers helped elderly residents understand prescriptions and apply for assistance programs. The foundation also provided small scholarships for students from rural counties interested in medicine, botany, nursing, or public health. Rachel still worked harder than she had ever worked in her life, but for the first time, the work belonged to a future she had chosen. Dr. Cho arrived just before 9, with a folder tucked beneath her arm. She found Rachel outside near the orchard, where Caleb and Sadie were tying labels to young plantings. "We received the final agreement," Hannah said. Rachel wiped soil from her gloves. "Already the manufacturers signed yesterday." They walked toward the garden office while Wade and 2 volunteers raised the new porch swing. Inside the office, Hannah spread the papers across a long table. The treatment developed from Evelyn's research had entered expanded clinical evaluation under an independent medical consortium. Early results supported much of what Evelyn had recorded decades before. No one was calling it a cure yet, but patients who had exhausted other options were showing signs of stabilized organ function and reduced inflammation. The licensing agreement prevented any single company from controlling the compound. Manufacturers had agreed to price limits, transparent production costs, and patient assistance requirements. A portion of every licensing payment would support rural clinics and future botanical research. Evelyn Carter was listed as the primary discoverer. Rachel's name appeared only as custodian of the recovered materials and executive director of the foundation. Hannah tapped one paragraph. "This clause guarantees access for patients who can't afford treatment." Rachel read it twice. That was the most important part. "I know. What about international access separate agreement?" "Same principle." Rachel looked through the window toward the farmhouse. Evelyn had hidden her work because she believed powerful people would turn suffering into permanent profit. 35 years later, her decisions still shaped every contract placed on the table. Would she approve, Rachel asked. Hannah smiled. She would probably mark up half the agreement in red ink and demand stronger language. That sounds right. They both laughed. Outside, a school bus pulled into the driveway, though it was Saturday. The county extension program had brought a group of middle school students for a garden tour. Caleb and Sadie stood beside the old stone border wearing green volunteer badges. 6 months earlier, Caleb had entered the property, coughing and frightened. Now he explained the difference between mountain mint and wild weeds to a circle of students. "This one smells stronger if you rub the leaf," he said. "But don't pull anything unless you ask." Some of these plants took decades to grow back. Sadie pointed toward a shaded bed. "And that's golden seal. People use too much of it in the wild, so part of the foundation's work is teaching conservation." Caleb did not mention his asthma. He did not need to. For the first time in years, illness was something he managed. Not the only story people knew about him. Near noon, Reverend Josiah Bell arrived carrying a framed photograph of Evelyn. He moved more slowly than he had in summer, leaning heavily on his cane, but his voice remained clear. "Where should she go?" he asked. Rachel led him to the oldest apple tree. A simple stone marker had been placed there facing the garden Evelyn once planned by hand. The inscription carried her full name, her dates, and a line chosen from her journal, "Knowledge becomes healing only when it is shared." Richard Vale Sr. had been denied release while awaiting trial on murder and conspiracy charges. Thomas Garrick's testimony, the recordings, internal company records, and evidence recovered from the forest had created a case too large to bury. Richard Vale Jr. and Victoria Vale faced federal charges involving obstruction, intimidation, and conspiracy. Sheriff Danner had been removed from office after investigators traced payments through the consulting firms Lena discovered. Justice had come late. Too late for Evelyn to return to her gardens or stand beside the patients her work might save. But not too late for her name to be restored. Lottie May placed lavender beneath the memorial stone. For a moment she said nothing. Then she touched Evelyn's photograph. "You should have been here to see this," she whispered. Reverend Bell stood beside her. "She is here in every life this place changes." Lena Ruiz arrived in plain clothes shortly afterward. She had declined an offer to return to the sheriff's department. Instead, she accepted a position with a state investigative unit that handled public corruption and official misconduct. Rachel hugged her. "You look different without the uniform. I sleep better without Danner calling me at 6 in the morning. You miss the badge." Lena considered the question. "Sometimes. But I don't miss wondering whether the person above me deserves theirs." By early afternoon, cars lined both sides of Carter Mill Road. The gathering marked 1 year since Rachel had raised her hand in the courthouse and spent her final $600. Neighbors carried casseroles, pies, folding chairs, and covered plates. Members of the volunteer department set up long tables beneath the oak trees. Someone brought a fiddle. Someone else brought a banjo. Children ran through the grass, while older residents sat near heaters and traded stories about Evelyn. The farmhouse porch, once swallowed by kudzu, held jars of winter greenery and strings of warm lights. Rachel stood at the top of the steps and looked across the crowd. A year earlier, she had believed survival meant hiding every weakness. Now, nearly every person before her had carried some part of the burden. Wade had repaired the roof. Lottie May had fed them. Reverend Bell had unlocked Evelyn's message. Lena had chosen truth over position. Hannah had protected the science. Caleb had reminded Rachel what they were truly defending. Even strangers had shown up with Hammer's lumber seed packets and checks folded inside unsigned envelopes. Rachel had not been rescued by one miracle. She had been carried by 100 acts of ordinary goodness. Reverend Bell opened the dedication with a prayer, but he kept it brief. "We are not here to celebrate wealth," he said afterward. "We are here to remember what becomes possible when courage refuses to sell itself." He invited Rachel to speak. She had prepared 3 pages. She used none of them. "When I came here," she began, "I was not looking for a legacy. I was looking for somewhere my son and I could sleep without being told to leave." Caleb stood near Sadie at the edge of the porch. Rachel looked at him. I thought buying this place might be the worst mistake of my life. For a while it looked like I was right. Soft laughter moved through the crowd. But this house taught me something. Being broken and being worthless are not the same thing. That was true of the house. It was true of Evelyn's forgotten work. And it was true of me. The crowd became very still. Evelyn believed medicine should serve people before profit. She paid a terrible price for that belief. The best way we can honor her is not only to punish those who harmed her, it is to continue what she started. Rachel looked toward the garden. This place will always bear her name. Her treatment will never belong to one corporation. And anyone who comes here for help will be treated with the dignity she gave her neighbors. Applause rose slowly, then filled the yard. Rachel stepped back before emotion overcame her. Wade met her near the door. You did well. I forgot everything I planned to say. That was probably why. The celebration lasted until evening. There were apple pies made from fruit harvested in the restored orchard. Children toasted marshmallows near the fire pit. Caleb and Sadie disappeared twice and returned both times with mud on their shoes. Lottie Mae insisted everyone take leftovers. At sunset, Wade led Rachel toward the front porch. The new swing hung from chains beneath the repaired roof. You finally finished it. I told you I would. She sat. The swing moved gently beneath her weight. Wade sat beside her, leaving only a narrow space between them. From the yard came the sound of laughter, fiddle music, and plates being stacked. Would you have believed any of this a year ago? He asked. Rachel looked at the lights glowing in the farmhouse windows. No. Me neither. You already had a house. I didn't say I needed a house. Their shoulders touched. Neither moved away. After the last guest departed, and Caleb went upstairs, Rachel carried the original brass key into Evelyn's restored study. The room held copies of her journals, framed photographs, botanical sketches, and the old microscope from the hidden laboratory. Her real research materials were secured elsewhere, but the study preserved the life behind the discovery. Rachel placed the key inside a small shadow box Wade had made from wood, recovered from the original porch. Beneath it, she placed a handwritten card, purchased for $600. What was found here could never be measured in money. She read the words aloud. The sentence held more truth than she had expected. The formula might be worth billions. The house had become valuable. The foundation had received donations from across the country. But none of those things measured what she found. She had found Caleb's laughter returning. She had found work that joined healing with purpose. She had found neighbors who became family. She had found Evelyn's voice after the world tried to silence it. And somewhere between broken shingles, late-night coffee court orders, and muddy garden paths, she had found her own courage. Rachel opened the study window. Cool night air entered carrying the scent of lavender from the beds below. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. She turned. Warm golden light moved briefly across the wall outside the study, like the glow of a lantern passing from one room to another. Rachel stepped into the hall. No one was there. Caleb slept upstairs. Wade had gone home, though his truck would probably return before breakfast, with some new repair that could not wait. The farmhouse stood quiet beneath the moonlight. Rachel was not frightened. She returned to the study and looked at Evelyn's photograph. "Thank you," she whispered, "for trusting someone you never met." The lavender scent grew stronger for one gentle moment. Then the curtains settled. From upstairs came the sound of Caleb laughing in his sleep. Rachel turned off the lamp and walked toward the staircase. Moonlight fell across Evelyn's journal, the framed brass key, and the words beneath it. The house was dark no longer. It had become a home, a garden, and a promise that what was buried could still return to the light.